Thanksgiving comes on the last Thursday in November and is a celebration of the joining of Native Americans and the European colonists. Now, this episode won't cover the history of this holiday, as it can be a hot topic, especially since Oklahoma has a deep-rooted Native American history, but I assure you we will cover that at some point. Instead, today we will cover food, as that is the centerpiece for families coming together to give thanks. I'm Stephen Morales, and welcome to this special Thanksgiving episode of Localalists. Everyone has good, and most likely bad memories of holidays, but one thing which stands out is the food. Think back for a moment to past Thanksgivings, and I'm sure there's a dish that stands out in your mind as being especially delicious.
Be grateful one, Pablo. Today is especially delicious.
With that in mind, I want to tell you a small part of Oklahoma history that not everyone knows about. Oklahoma has a state meal. That's right, a state meal. Oklahoma is the first state to have a state meal, and the only other state that actually has a state meal is Louisiana. Put into law in 1988, the Oklahoma state meal seems more like a homage to the Southern-style food of our past and less like a formal meal. Most of the foods on this list can be found in small restaurants and cafes around Oklahoma. The meal is as follows: chicken fried steak, barbecue pork, biscuits, sausage and gravy, cornbread, corn, fried okra, squash, black-eyed peas, grits, strawberries, and pecan pie. Or pecan pie, depending on how you pronounce the word. That sounds like a Thanksgiving spread Oklahoma style to me, so let's take a minute to cover the history of each of these foods and why they are a part of the state meal. Quick side note, a lot of these foods have vague histories, with most of them having several theories of their origin, so we went with the ones that we came across the most often in our research. First up, we have chicken fried steak, which is most identical to the German schnitzel and is similar to the Scottish collops. German settlers in Texas might have brought the meal to the region, and over time it evolved into what we now know as a chicken fried steak. This food was used as an inexpensive meal for the working class and is categorized as comfort food. Next up are biscuits, which started in Europe as a storable version of bread. In America, biscuits became a cheap addition to meals and were relied upon as food during the Civil War. Of course, in the South, biscuits wouldn't be complete without sausage and gravy. Pork was abundant in the South, which is why it became an addition to gravy. Gravy has a long history and is the evolution of cooking sauce over the centuries. In the 16th century is when we start to see the first signs of more modern gravy, simply called meat sauce at the time. Of course, this gets more fattening once the South puts its spin on it for more of a comfort food. Side note, this is actually my wife's favorite meal. Everyone loves good barbecue, and here in Oklahoma, it is a staple food for sure. The history of barbecue dates back 200,000 plus years and is really tied to the invention of fire. There are various ways to barbecue meat, and initially people would hang meat over fire, bury meat like you see done in the traditional luau, or simply throw meat on top of a pile of wood on fire. Later, meats would get wrapped in certain leaves to add flavor. Here in Oklahoma, pork was an inexpensive animal to have, so the state had a lot of pigs raised for consumption, so barbecue pork was a natural fit. Corn and cornbread are up next, which are Native American dishes. Corn was used because of its versatility and was a staple food in the Native American diet. Corn itself is a hybridization of a grass. You can still find corn in its original form, but it looks more like wheat almost. Over time, this grass was changed with help from humans to produce larger and larger seeds, which is the corn. Corn is storable and is now in most foods you eat in the form of various iterations, such as high fructose corn syrup, xanthan gum, dextrose. The list really goes on and on. Grits are another meal made from corn, which is also on the state meal menu. And we got these from the Native Americans, but you really see the South kind of put their twist on it to make it comfort food, which typically means adding lots and lots of butter or sugar. The color of grits is dependent upon the color of the corn used, which is why you might find yellow or white grits. Next, we have black-eyed peas, which are also called the cow pea. Black-eyed peas are thought to originate in North Africa and were a staple food in Greek and Roman diets. This spread of black-eyed peas is linked to the slave trade, as the slaves would bring them with them for not only food, but a reminder of home, which is how they came to America, as well as how the next food on the menu came to America also. Fried okra is deep-fried okra, but the vegetable itself was used by the Egyptians and a staple food in Africa. Fried okra is a southern comfort version of cooked okra and was fried to add more flavor to the food. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, most of the fruits and vegetables we eat today have been changed over time with the help of humans and animals through farming and grazing. Most of the food that you get at the store was at one point most likely poisonous or looked nothing like it does now. Which brings us to our next food on the menu, squash. People didn't initially eat squash because it was very poisonous and bitter. And the poison, that's what gave it the bitter taste. Humans then began farming squash, and over time, through breeding, were able to get it to the current squash we find at the store, which we can now eat with no poison in it. Next up, we have strawberries, which have a very different history, as the current strawberry found at the store was first grown in Brittany, France, during the late 18th century. Prior to this, the only strawberries were the small wild ones you could find. Uses for the wild version date back to the Romans, where the berry was used for its medicinal purposes. Strawberries are the Oklahoma state fruit, believe it or not, and the town of Stillwell has held an annual strawberry festival for over 60 years. Quick side note, watermelon is actually the state vegetable. That's right, state vegetable. It was voted in 2007. We have two different numbers that we found. One showed 78 to 19 in favor, and another one actually showed 44 to 2 in favor. But regardless, it actually passed. Now, Senator Don Barrington, who actually sponsored the bill, said that watermelon comes from the cucumber and gourd families, which are classified as vegetables. That was his reason for making watermelon the state vegetable. And I don't know about you, but I've always considered watermelon a fruit, but we keep going back and forth on what is classified as a fruit and a vegetable, so just interesting fact for you. And that brings us to the grand finale, or at least that's what I think of it as it's pecan pie, or pecan, however you want to say it. Now, the history of pies in general go back to the Egyptians, but pecans were introduced by the Native Americans to the European settlers. Pecan pie itself has publications as far back as 1886 mentioning recipes. There's a legend behind the current iteration of pecan pie, which tells the story of an employee's wife of Karo syrup making a pecan pie using Karo syrup as the base. For those who don't know what Karo syrup is, it's just corn syrup.
Did you know that corn, one of America's favorite foods, is used to make America's favorite syrup, Karo? Yes, in every bottle of Karo syrup, you get the wholesome kind of sweetness that comes from corn. Karo is delicious poured on waffles, French toast, and pancakes. It's a special treat on hot biscuits. And Karo is wonderful for cooking, too. Karo gives pecan pie that special texture and extra flavor, makes cake frosting smooth, never grainy. And holiday popcorn novelties made with Karo taste so good, they're fun to make, too.
Liquid corn syrup. So there you have it, the Oklahoma State meal and the brief history behind each food on the menu. Without going through and calculating everything out myself, I was actually able to find a quick calculation someone did that said that this meal would be 2,700 calories, 125 grams of fat, and 5,250 milligrams of sodium. I don't want to know just how much sugar it would contain, but I would assume more than 60 grams of sugar, which is a little over 4 tablespoons. With Oklahoma's obesity rate now at 1/3 of the population, I hope some of these foods get healthy alternatives soon. But on the day we give thanks, I expect some of these comfort foods will be on everybody's table, including myself. I want to thank you so much for listening to this special Thanksgiving episode of Local A-Lists, and I hope you have a happy holiday.